Donald Trump gives Iran 48 hours to cut a deal or open up the Strait of Hormuz. If that doesn't happen, Trump threatens, all hell will rain down on them. It comes after Wednesday night's national address where Trump said the U.S. military operation in Iran will wind down in the coming weeks, but not without intensifying strikes.
I can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong. In the meantime, discussions are ongoing.
Since that address, attacks on both sides have ramped up, with the U.S. and Israel hitting a century-old medical research center in Tehran, steel plants, and a bridge near the capital. It's part of Trump's vow to hit Iran's bridges and electric power plants if its leaders do not agree to his terms to end the war. This past week, Trump also reignited threats to pull out of NATO after allies refused to engage in the war. Earlier, I spoke to the former United States ambassador to NATO, Douglas Lute, about the status of the conflict. Ambassador Lute, thanks so much for joining us.
It's good to be with you.
So the president has said a couple of things over the past week, particularly in his address to the nation, that the U.S. is very close to finishing objectives in Iran, but also says the next 2 weeks will involve intense military action. As someone that's worked very closely on wars in the Middle East, do you believe that the end of this war is in sight? Do you understand what the president is saying when he says those two things?
Well, I think he's conflating two parts of the operation, right? On the military side, the military objectives, so the Iranian Navy, the Air Force, the drone and missile capability of the Iranians, and the production facilities behind those military capabilities. That part of the campaign, I think, is nearing the point of diminishing returns. That is, that we have fewer and fewer targets that we've identified. And the ones we've identified, we've pretty much hit, and probably hit and struck again. So the military campaign is reaching sort of a logical conclusion. What is not concluding is the political end state that these military objectives should be connected to, but from the outset have not been connected to. So what we're really facing here and confronting is the disconnect, the strategic disconnect between the military campaign and the political end.
And so the political end, the part of what happens next, how much will the United States be involved in that part of what happens going forward?
Well, the president began, I think, by way of the speech the other night, to suggest to the American people, to prepare the American people that he was going to declare success on the military front and sort of walk away from the political end. And there are two looming questions here with regard to the political end. One is, what about the 1,000 pounds of highly enriched uranium that has remained essentially untouched by this most recent military campaign? And perhaps even more important to the global economy, what about the status of the Strait of Hormuz? So these would be unanswered, even though we could declare success on the military front.
So the Strait of Hormuz is obviously where other countries like Canada are not involved, but could be involved if there's a ceasefire in place.
Right.
What do you think needs to happen to get to that point, and how important will other countries be in making sure that the strait can open up?
Well, I don't think there's a military solution to opening the Strait of Hormuz. And here geography plays a dominant role. Geography, even in the 21st century, matters. And the fact of geography is that Iran has a dominant geographic position of advantage over the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, we can't deny that. There's no military answer or response to that geographic advantage. So I think inevitably, this means some sort of negotiation, some sort of compromise with the new regime in Tehran. And only then can the shipping companies, which rely on free and safe passage, have a sufficient confidence and pay attention to their insurance rates, right?
Sure.
And have a sufficient confidence that they can pass to and from the Persian Gulf with safety.
This past week, the president also, again, suggested backing out of NATO. It was unclear to me whether that was related to his desire for some other countries to come in and sort out the Strait of Hormuz, or whether this is, again, something that we should be taking seriously. How seriously are you taking those comments, Ambassador?
Well, I take it both not so seriously and seriously at the same time. Let me explain. So, in a legal sense, there's a law in the United States that the president, as the executive authority in our government, may not unilaterally withdraw from NATO. So he has to, in legal terms, go back to the U.S. Congress and either receive a 2/3 vote in the U.S. Senate or a combined House and Senate act of Congress that supports the withdrawal. He won't get that legal authority to do so. However, and here's where I am concerned, he can do things as the commander-in-chief that essentially deflates or reduces the American role in NATO to the extent that, in effect, he causes severe damage, even though the U.S. remains a member.
Does NATO survive if the United States is not participating in the way that you're talking about?
So I think NATO survives, but it survives in a much depleted state, a much weakened, degraded state. And of course, for an alliance that depends on deterrence as its key factor, lack of confidence, lack of U.S. leadership, lack of U.S. commitment are serious blows.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is going to be in Washington this coming week. He has sort of become what people call a Trump whisperer, as you know. He's been able to de-escalate a lot of times with the president. I wonder how much you think that meeting is important to try to get things settled a little bit, not only with the president, but in terms of geopolitics.
Well, it's typical for the Secretary General to make a trip to Washington as preparation for an upcoming NATO summit. Of course, there is a NATO summit in Ankara in July. So this trip was probably pre-scheduled before this most recent controversy. I think the Secretary General will try to steady the ship of state here, if you will, try to calm things down. But I think, frankly, the damage has been done. I don't think we can walk past the kind of rhetoric that certainly Canadians understand, but Danes understand with regard to the Greenland controversy, and now with regard to the war in Iran, many other NATO countries as well understand that this kind of lack of confidence, this kind of degrading rhetoric coming out of the White House can't be simply ignored. So there's no escaping that. The coalition of the willing that was built to deal with Ukraine has now sort of taken on a broader, I think, perspective, and Australia is now involved. And I wonder if you see sort of a new security partnership emerging, not in the formal way of NATO, but if that's something that you're observing and what you think that means. Well, I think this notion of a coalition or some sort of substitute for NATO is a natural reaction. So as NATO loses credibility and loses steam, if you will, there should be something that replaces it. The problem with the coalition of the willing, in my view, is that it's first a coalition, which means that members of this loose ad hoc grouping can come and go as they will. And then second of all, the willing. And the notion that nations will remain firmly committed no matter what, even in tough times, suggests that they may not always be so willing. So this is a reasonable response to sort of the lack of confidence in NATO, but it's not, the coalition is not something I think we can count on.
Former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Douglas Lute, thank you for your time, sir.
Good to be with you.
The war in Iran is having an impact on costs here in Canada. Certainly, you are feeling it at the pumps as gas and diesel prices soar. The Gulf region, though, is also critical to global fertilizer production. The cost of nitrogen, a key nutrient for crop growth, has skyrocketed in Canada since the war began, just as farmers begin their planting season. Drew Spoelstra is a farmer in Ontario, and he joins me from Binbrook, that is on the outskirts of Hamilton, Ontario. Nice to see you this morning.
Thanks for having me, Rosemary.
Yeah, and happy Easter if that's something you're celebrating today as well. Diesel prices have shot up, obviously, at the same time as gas, and we've been hearing about the surge in fertilizer prices. Tell me what you're seeing and how it's impacting your farm.
Absolutely. We're seeing impacts on both of those fronts already, both fertilizer and fuel. Farmers this spring will be heading to the field shortly and under a cloud of real uncertainty. We're not sure what things are going to look like going forward for both fuel costs and fertilizer supply and costs. And so, we're having a lot of those discussions with our members and with government and with suppliers as well on what the future might look like. We've already seen those fuel costs double from last season, and pretty significant increases in fertilizer as well.
Give me a sense of what you're talking about in terms of numbers for your farm, for instance. How much more will fertilizer cost this year if the prices remain where they are?
Well, it's a little hard to determine yet. I mean, some retailers aren't even pricing fertilizer because they're not sure what their supply is going to be like going forward. We do believe that there's enough supply here for the spring season to get our crops in, but we're not sure about that replacement and what that cost will be going forward. So we have, lots of farmers have prices locked in going forward into the spring.
Yeah.
But just that cloud of uncertainty on what things will look like going forward. It's a little clearer on fuel. I mentioned our costs have doubled since last spring season. So, what cost me $1,000 to fill up my tractor for the day last year is now going to be $2,000, and we don't have the ability to pass that cost up.
And I know that farmers are good at dealing with changing circumstances, whether it be weather or prices. I know that's something you're all kind of used to, but how unusual is it to have these kinds of challenges all at the same time?
Well, I mean, it's been a lot more prevalent over the last few years coming out of the pandemic. We certainly had that. We had the Russian-Ukraine conflict. Now we've got this conflict in the Middle East. So we've been dealing with a lot of uncertainty over the last, 6-7 years, and even before that with weather and market conditions. But I'll say we're getting kind of tired of it. It's been a long haul over the last number of years. Costs continue to rise, and we don't have any control over what we're getting for our products at the other end. So we continue to advocate to government for better risk management programs, for the tools that we need in our toolbox to continue to farm and grow food for people across this country and around the world.
As you said, you can't set the price. So just so I understand, does that just mean you just have to operate with loss and hope that you get some support from the government?
Well, we have to make sure we make good decisions on our farm businesses and that we do the best we can to be sustainable going forward. So, we do advocate for stronger risk management programs, for insurance-based types of programs, so that we're covered. And we can't sustain too many losses. So we need to make sure that we have those tools available in an event that our costs continue to soar and we can't make that up with the products that we're selling on the world market.
You're a farmer, but I know that you also talk to lots of farmers. You represent farmers. How are they feeling about things these days?
Well, I'd say they're a little on edge. Farmers are concerned about what's going to happen going forward. They're concerned about the sustainability of their businesses and the opportunity to continue to farm. They're concerned about their mental health and what that might look like as we go forward with all of this uncertainty. Farmers just want to go out there, grow their crops, and continue to feed people around the world, and really don't want to deal with all these headaches that we're seeing coming our way. So, we'd like to see some more certainty in the world if that's ever an option, and I think that'll provide some relief for farmers going forward.
If this were to get resolved, I mean, it is kind of, this is happening so far away, but having such a direct impact on you and then on others. If this were to get resolved in the next couple of weeks, would that have, has the damage already been done, or would you be able to make up the losses there, Drew?
Well, it would certainly help, I think. But, as we've always seen, prices are quick to go up and really slow to come down. So,
Sure.
20% of our costs are directly related to energy, fuel, and fertilizer on farm here in Ontario. Mm-hmm. And, we've seen those go up dramatically, as we talked about already, and they'll definitely be slower to come down. But the sooner these conflicts come to a close, I think the better for our businesses going forward.
Drew Spoelstra, thank you so much for, I know you didn't get up early for me because you're a farmer, but thanks for making time for me on this Easter Sunday. Appreciate it.
You bet. Happy Easter.
Okay, you too.